Alright guys, so today I'll be doing my, engineering graphics workbook. So I'm doing the applied geometry section, and I'll be doing the ones that can reasonably be done in AutoCAD, which is GEO13 to GEO30. Now the problem is there is basically no way that this video will be useful. See, the problem is I'm using Windows Game Recorder, right? Because I don't have a proper screen recorder. And the problem with that is Windows Game Recorder sucks ass. Right. Basically, Windows Game Recorder would only capture the active layer, right? Not layer, active window. Yeah. So anything that's not on that window, like if I open something, like a sub window, property window, even a right click, right? That doesn't show up on the recorded video. So this video is absolutely useless, basically. Oddly enough, I don't think this this drawing would need any construction lines. So instead of, saying anything useful, or anything relevant to the, why is this in radius mode? Specified. This is very weird. Specify. Why is it in diameter mode? Huh. So I'll be talking about, random things in the background while the video shows me working. I hope it works out. I have a feeling this won't be very good content. I'm gonna be honest here. I mean, my content normally isn't very good, is it? Yeah, it's like worse than usual. 140. That's about right. In a way, this stuff is relaxing. It is like doing art, except you're not using pen and paper. You're using AutoCAD. Anyway, yeah, like I said, I'll be trying to talk about some, unrelated things in the background. So basically, maybe some news, some discussions. I asked on Instagram, what people want me to talk about. I got a few replies. So first one, about the shortcuts and hotkeys in AutoCAD. I don't know anything about that, so I'm sorry. Can't help you with that one. Thankfully, I'll do the, for the quest about doing this one in English. That's not too bad. I think there's also update on college life. I'll do that one. And maybe we can talk about history of Thai dictatorships. There are also a few that I cannot talk about. Curiously. You know who you are. And obviously I don't think I can fill 3 to 4 hours of content with just those. So maybe I'll probably talk about some other things as well. Actually, before we go to like the requested content, I just want to talk, a quick talk about the recent events, specifically the shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand. Obviously, very horrible thing. This is basically restating the stuff I said on Facebook, but yeah, it's basically just restating the stuff I said on Facebook, but I think a lot of people got the motive for the shooter wrong. He's not doing it to promote white supremacy. Actually, if you've been around like white supremacist circles, I have sometimes. A lot of it is about building a community these days. It's about like creating a strong white community for white majority countries. Very little of it is about actually pushing back against non-white populations. I think at that point everyone sort of accepted that it's not going to be feasible to sort of accepted it's not going to be feasible to actually remove the non-white population. So most white supremacists these days are quite content with prolonging their inevitable demise. Take from that what you may. The thing is, I think every white supremacist knows that shooting up a church is not going to get them any support. Obviously, society in general already looks down quite significantly on white supremacists. So modern white supremacy is really not gonna benefit from such mindless violence. And again, this obviously feeds into my point about the shooter doing it for just for fun, basically. If you haven't read my Facebook post, what I said on that Facebook post was that he did it basically as a shit post. A shit post is when you make content, you post something on an image board or on social media that doesn't actually have any value. It's very poorly thought out, and its intent is not to change people's minds. It's not to get people to think. It has no real purpose other than to piss people off. It's just there to ruin the day for people who see it. It's just there to, like I said, it's there to piss people off. And the shooter was basically a psychopath who found a way to get everybody to be pissed off by his shitpost. The guy was on, was it 8chan, right, an image board, and the media was quick to blame sort of 8chan and other image boards for radicalizing him, which I think is a load of shit. Dying as they may be, there's still a lot of people that go on those image boards, and frankly, none of them, except this fucking guy, turned out to be shooters. So it's clearly not the image board's fault. The big problem with this guy is that he was a psychopath. Normal people, no matter what they, regardless of whether they go on 8chan, 4chan, Reddit, Facebook, YouTube, normal people don't go out and shoot other people, right? So clearly this guy is fucked in the head. And if you're fucked in the head, you're gonna do fucked in the head things. Regardless of whether you're going on Facebook, YouTube, or image boards. You have to remember that this guy, the reason he did all this was, he was a mixture of things, like, it was a deadly concoction of psychopathy and shitty internet culture. But the deadly part of that concoction was the psychopath. There are thousands of normal people that go on these image boards. There are thousands of people that, go on the internet, but now they're all affected by his actions, which, again, if you've read his manifesto, this is his intention from the start. He did all this just to piss as many people off as possible, and it's crazy that he fucking succeeded. Just like that. He got what he wanted. And what he wanted wasn't to shoot down minorities. What he wanted was to fuck over, the right-wingers. That's in his manifesto. If you've read his manifesto, it's really written like a fucking joke. I've seen sections of it, and it really is a fucking joke. Like I said on Facebook, it's obviously horseshit that someone would blame Fortnite for making them violent to the point of killing over 4,000 people, but this guy fucking said it. And obviously he's taking the piss with that one. You know what, screw it, I'm keeping that part in. I'm definitely gonna say some dumb shit on this video, so bear that in mind. It's kind of hard to talk for several hours and remain fairly intelligent. Sorry, seriously, it really is hard to talk for several hours and speak intelligently for all those hours. One example is Ethan Klein, right, from H3 Productions. Before he did podcasts, everyone sort of thought he was amazing. He was the godfather, daddy of the internet. And he started doing podcasts, and we realised he's not quite so hot. Anyway, back to the senator thing, right? He was talking about how the attack was a product of mass immigration, which, I don't know, it's... Definitely, first things first, it's a ridiculously insensitive thing to say. And of course you got basically everyone saying he's a jackass, except sort of the very extremities of the right wing. No, when I say right wing, I mean sort of white nationalists, rather than right wing in terms of economics. Quite an important distinction to make there, because a lot of white nationalists are actually fairly, well, socialists in terms of their economic beliefs. They just happen to, want to create a country for white people. So, where was I? Yeah, the senator, right? I don't know, I can't say I completely agree. I don't think it's a product of, like, mass immigration. I do think it's horseshit that, you got these organizations like the EU and, whatever, who want to push for immigration into more developed countries, which ends up benefiting basically nobody, right? The countries that those immigrants or refugees, whatever they originally came from, don't benefit from losing a significant portion of their strong, able-bodied young men. And the host country usually finds out that these people don't really work, don't do much work. Thailand has its fair share of that with, the refugee crisis that our dipshit neighbours to the north created because they were too fucking violent to not kill people. God, it's so fucking hard for you fucking jackasses to not, like, genocide people. It's a tough shit part is now Thailand is expected to take in all the refugees. Anyway, yeah, the global community, would like for basically every country that's better off to suddenly have to deal with people that come from countries that are less well off, right? Problem is when they get over here, get over to a more developed country, they usually don't contribute as much as they would have if they were in the country they came from. The reason, I think, is because of the welfare. There is a lot of aid for people who don't work in a first world country, but not so much if you're in basically in the middle of whatever, right? So these people immigrate, they find out, hey, I don't have to fucking work, so they don't. Much to the disappointment, I suppose, of the politicians who had hoped that these immigrants would come in and replace the aging population. Which brings me to what I've wanted to talk about next, which is immigration. No, not immigration. Let's talk about immigration, right? What was I going to talk about? Yes, aging population. Aging population is a thing that happens basically in every developed or developing country that's getting there. Basically what happens is at a certain point the economy is not developing fast enough to sustain young people, and this causes the birth rates to drop. White nationalists would like to believe that this is part of a global conspiracy by Jewish people to destroy the white race, which is obviously a load of horseshit because this sort of stunted population growth also happens for Japan and, well, frankly, Thailand as well. Thailand is beginning to have an aging population. So I think the problem is, partly due to culture, right? Culturally we now believe that it's rather shameful to live with our parents, right? And that means we don't want to ask them for money. But the problem is, without sort of external help, it's actually kind of difficult for a person to raise, for two people, mother and father, to raise a family of two. Replacement rates, right? If two people are going to get married, they should have two people, just to keep the population rate constant. So, because economically it's so difficult to sustain two children, what ends up happening is some people hold off having children. And the problem is, if you hold off having children for too long, you can't have children anymore. It's a medical thing. It's a medical thing, of course. Women, if you have children too late, chances of the baby getting some sort of genetic defect significantly increases. And also with men as well, there was a research done. If you have children later, the chances of the baby developing autism increases, by some amount with every 10 years added to the parent's age when they conceive. And this is true for both men and women. I don't know the exact number, I don't remember, but you can look it up, it's real. So they hold off having children, in order to get economically prepared, but then they end up, waiting for too long, and now they can't have children at all, and it's terrible. A lot of solutions to that. You got the one political party for Thailand's election cycle this time around. They plan on giving money to people immediately when they have children. Me, I don't know. I don't think it's an entirely good idea. It will, the problem is, for example, in Thailand, right? You got people who shouldn't have more children having more children, and they end up, not being able to properly care for the children, and those children end up maybe being criminals, or at the very least being poorly raised. Where was I? Yeah, so, and I think if you're giving money to, just giving out a flat amount of money for people to have children, I think it's going to encourage those types of people to have more children, and not going to give a significant amount of incentive, for fuck's sake. Not given a significant amount of incentive for parents who are more capable of raising their children properly. So that's one thing I think would be a problem with that idea. So I think the realistic solution, honestly, would actually be to have some sort, just culturally, we'd have to go back to being okay with getting monetary support from our parents, at a certain level, because otherwise we can't. Otherwise, people will just hold off having children, basically for way too long. Yeah, you have to remember that an older population is obviously going to have, some savings, right? And they are more likely to be financially capable of raising children compared to, a younger population who just entered the workforce. Now, obviously, I don't have that much information about the whole thing, so maybe I'm misidentifying the problem, maybe there's more to it, but I think fundamentally it's an economic problem because parents, responsible parents, the ones that are not having children, want to be financially ready before they have kids, and the modern economy doesn't pay well enough for them to actually, have children. They don't have the savings required to safely raise a child. So they have to do, so they hold off having children, and I think a potential solution is to get more parental involvement in raising the next generation. So that's my take on the declining birth rates. I think I do think my solution is better than giving money to people just to have children, because again those policies I think would attract a different demographic to have children, right? And those demographics may not necessarily be the demographic that we'd want to have more children. Yeah, that's my take on it. So one of my friends asked me to talk about dictatorships in Thailand, so I'll talk about that. And first things first, you do realize, you do have to notice that actual history of dictators do begin after the revolution where Thailand switched over to democracy, right? Maybe it's because records of prior dictators obviously were not kept very well under a monarch, but it does it does draw attention to what some people say, which is that monarchies are actually better for preserving liberties than, say, democracy. Not a view I necessarily believe in, but it is an interesting take on the topic. Anyway, so prior to the revolution, right, there are people who held power. They managed towns or cities, or they ran certain functions of the government. A government system didn't just prop up after the democracy. It has already been there, right? Just that later, these positions had to be democratically elected. But prior to that, there were people filling these roles, and usually they, held some sort of relation to the palace or the crown. Now, as the positions became more democratic in nature, these people who previously held power suddenly had to compete with each other, right? And this sort of power struggle, I think, is partially what led to the violence and all the dictatorship stuff, right? Because if you go back, between the democratic sort of the switch, and between now you see a lot of dictatorships that came to power as a result of a power struggle. And what you'll find is the powers that are struggling for power has not necessarily been the way they are today. Quite interestingly, really early into Thailand's democracy, the crown and military leaders were not seeing eye to eye. Is that legal to say in this country? I don't fucking know. But if you do look into the history, you'll notice that military and the crown only recently, well, relatively recently, came back to terms. And during the Cold War, one of our worst dictators, Salit, the piece of shit, had backing from the United States government, who helped his government distribute propaganda against the anti-government people. Saying they're communists, they're evil people. Because back then that served the United States goal, right? And whereas today you will see that our dictatorships are less favorably viewed by the United States. They usually, once the military takes over, USA now says, yeah, we're not friends. We're on worse terms than before. And military dictators tend to be more friendly towards China, who we weren't, who back in the Cold War we weren't on that good of terms with. So that is something that's just interesting. I don't really have much to say. It's honestly, when you look at what dictatorships were and what dictatorships are today, it's actually an odd sense of appreciation that things aren't quite as bad as they were. Right? Are things bad today? Sure. But they could have been much worse. A few decades earlier, we wouldn't be able to so freely criticize the junta. Is it junta? Oh, it's JUNTA. The military government. Basically, we won't be able to so freely criticize Prayut's government like we are today. And part of that is thanks to the internet. I know they're trying to control the internet, but frankly, they won't be able to control us all. Back then, there were only a few ways you can share your thoughts, right? And a lot of the people who did share their thoughts, they had to be authors. They just had to go out and print their books, distribute them, and that's where the government got them, because there weren't that many people who actually wrote books. So governments tracked them down and did whatever. It's not just in Thailand, but also in countries like China and other places that were dictatorships, right? If you spoke out against the government back then, it was very easy to track you down and kill you. But in modern times, thankfully, everyone has a voice now, so it is a lot easier to get away with criticizing the government. So again, yes, things are bad, but they could have been much, much worse. So that's my take on dictatorships in Thailand. Anyway, speaking of dictatorships, as you probably know if you're watching this video, Thailand's junta leader, Prayut, is now running for an election, right? He has his own party. And his party was strongly attacked a few days prior because of their, well, frankly ridiculous policy, right? So they were proposing an increase of the minimum wage, the daily minimum wage, from 300 to 425 baht. So that's, I don't know how many percent. It's like 30, no, it's over 30%, right? Yeah, so that's a lot of increase. Now, of course, the people are right to attack this policy, but what you have to remember is that there are a lot of other political parties in this election cycle that are proposing similar policies, right? I think the current minimum wage per month is 6,000 baht. I don't know if that has gone up, but Democrat Party is proposing a yearly salary of 120,000 baht. So that works out to 10,000 baht per month, which would be an even more significant increase than what Prayut's party is proposing. But I don't see people, well, I don't see many people criticizing that. And of course, a few years back, the same people that are currently up in arms about Prayut's party was quite okay when Pheu Thai, or whatever they were called back then, I think they were Pheu Thai back then, raised the minimum wage by I think back then it was a fairly significant amount as well. And now you see this really interesting switch. Back then what would rightly be called the right wingers in my country, well, right wing, they are rather spineless, but they lean kind of right. And those people were protesting the raise in minimum wage, but now they are supporting a party which proposes a wage increase as well. And the people that were supporting the increase in minimum wage are now against the increase in minimum wage. So it does play into an interesting political theory that it doesn't matter the policy, but rather the people proposing it. And along with the raise in minimum wage, you see a lot of people making comparisons to Venezuela. I don't think it's a fair comparison. To be honest, I think it undermines, the argument against their party when you bring up such a shitty argument like Venezuela, because again, even if his policies went into effect, chances are it's not going to have anywhere near the effect that it had than the Venezuelan government had. That problem was a serious compound of multiple problems together. Yes, there was a raise in minimum wage, but then there were also several severe problems with their monetary supply, right? The problem with Venezuela mainly actually was that the government, because the government controlled basically most of the economy in Venezuela, they were socialist, they held power over the economy, and they basically relied heavily on Venezuela's oil reserves. And because of that, they were significantly screwed over by OPEC. OPEC was protesting, I think it was the United States deal with Iran over nuclear weapons, and basically what they did was they drove oil prices down to force American oil companies out of business. But among the affected was Venezuela, because they relied so much on oil for their economy, and unlike the United States economy, which was very large and fairly diverse, the Venezuelan economy couldn't recover, and it started this serious trend of the economy going down the shitter. So I don't think even if Prelude's policies went into effect, we would be anywhere like Venezuela. Honestly, it's a weak argument. It shows you didn't do much of your homework. You're relying on the emotional effect of the pictures of the shitty living conditions in Venezuela for your argument, and because of that, it falls flat when faced with actual facts. So let's talk about weak arguments against the junta, because I see a lot of them and I fucking hate them because they're stupid. Right? I hate dictatorships, but stupid people are what leads to dictatorships, man. And these stupid people, they don't quite realize they're stupid. They would love to push other people down. They say other people are stupid, but they're dumb as shit. They're fucking annoying. They're everywhere, and people fucking agree with these dumbasses. Let's talk about a few. My absolute least favorite argument against the junta is communists. They're not fucking communists, okay? No part of the junta aligns with the communist ideals. And this highlights a problem with Thai people, is that we have been brainwashed by the CIA to believe that communism is automatically synonymous with dictatorships. All dictatorships, they're communist. No, it's fucking not. Shut the fuck up. Period is not communist. No part of that fucking government is communist. And you can shut your stupid fucking mouth when you're trying to say, Period is gonna be like fucking Soviet. Shut the fuck up. Fuck's sake. Sorry, that was a bit too emotional. But it is annoying, man. You see all these relatively young people, very idealistic people, and they just go out and say, hey, yeah, Prelude's gonna be like communists, yeah, haha. And fellow fellow people who think like that go chime in and say, yeah. And the problem is when you try to reason with these people, when you try to say Prelude is not communist, you automatically get lumped in with people who do support Prelude. There was this one time, a dumb dipshit like that was going on about how, Prelude is a communist, right? And I said, no, Prelude's not communist. It was on Facebook, which is obviously is a bit of an intellectual cesspool. So I said, Prelude's not communist. And suddenly, you got all these dumb little dipshits attacking me for saying that Prelude is not communist. They're saying I fucking support the dictatorship, when I did not say anything that would have remotely resembled support for the regime. I just said he's not communist, maybe you should, do your fucking homework. And they were fucking furious. Fuck off. God. Another one is, just dismissing people who support the regime as old dinosaurs who are about to die. You see this in other countries as well, with Remainers saying that the Brexit leavers are going to fucking die. Anyway, and they shouldn't fucking vote. This is basically the inverse of old people saying, you're voting for the first time, you're stupid. The reality is, what comes with age is a certain level of experience. You live to 50, you've been screwed over by more politicians than you would be if you're 20. That's the reality of it. And sometimes young people do need to listen to what these old people are saying, because sometimes their experience does give them a different point of view than what you as a young 18 or 20-year-old would see the world as. So again, this ties into one of my earlier videos where I said, you shouldn't dismiss opinions. You should always take them into consideration, see why someone would say that, and then maybe use that to shape your own worldview. For old people who I don't think watch my videos, the inverse is you do have to listen to young people as well. They're raised on this new generation, new technology. They have new worldviews, and they see the world a different way than you do. Right? You come from a place of experience. They come from a place of ideology. So it is important to consider everyone's voice, see what forms their opinions, their backgrounds, their thoughts, and not just dismiss people. For Brexit, it was that young people were born, the people who voted Remain mostly were born after the European Union was created. And, they've never seen what life without the European Union was. It just was how things were. Meanwhile, the old people, have seen what the UK without the European Union was like, and to them it was better back then. But while young people lack the experience of what the UK was like before the European Union, old people who voted to leave sometimes lack sort of the vision to see what the UK would be like in a modern world without the European Union. So if both sides actually shared their thoughts, it would lead to nuance and a better view on Brexit than if just the Remainers talk to Remainers, the Leaves talk to Leaves, and same thing in Thailand. But again, it's hard for people with differing political opinions to talk to each other, right? It's it's like that. So, yeah, that's my take on shitty political arguments. Speaking of shutdown, Watch People Die, the subreddit, was shut down entirely, or banned, along with the discussion subreddit, Watch People Die Talk. Likely in response to people posting or telling people how to get access to the video of the Christchurch shooting. I think the subreddit did not allow video of the shooting the shooter actually recorded the whole thing on to Facebook Live. The subreddit itself, according to sources, say the subreddit itself didn't actually allow people to post a video of the shooting, but there were comments telling people where to find it. Me personally, I don't know where to find this. It's not on LiveLeak. LiveLeak, the usual sources for this sort of stuff actually banned it as well, and it's very odd because there's video of it. It should be everywhere by now, but somehow it's being suppressed. But anyway, so yeah, Watch People Die is completely banned. Formerly it was quarantined on Reddit. Sorry. I don't know. I think Reddit has been looking for an excuse to ban those quarantined subs for a long time, but this basically given the push for this gave them the push in the right direction for them, and they now have a serious excuse to ban the sub. It's understandable that a company that relies on investors throwing advertiser money at it wouldn't want to host content about people dying. But again, the Watch People Die subreddits, even though I don't really go on there, sources where you can watch people, the various ways with which a human life can end, I think is very valuable. Because again, it gives appreciation for how fragile life is, right? Watching people die with as simple as a wrong stroke of the finger, it gives you appreciation for your current state of living, and you realize that life can go away from you at any time. So live your life valuably. It's also a good source to see what you shouldn't do, right? You see a lot of those, in accident videos on YouTube as well, but YouTube and Facebook as well. You watch these videos and you realize, okay, I don't want to end up like that. I shouldn't do that. And I honestly think Reddit is doing something wrong by banning Watch People Die. A lot of people agree. I don't personally frequent that sub, but a lot of people do, and they do use it for fairly important purposes. One commenter on a different subreddit talked about how he was a safety supervisor at a factory, and he uses clips from Watch People Die to teach people, what not to do. And again, that's very important, right? So I think Reddit shouldn't have done that. Speaking of closing subreddits, there's a push going on now among more easily offended, I suppose, circles on Reddit, like against hate subreddits, or I don't know, that's the only place I've actually seen it. But there's a push going on now on Reddit to ban more right-wing circles, right? More right-wing subreddits on Reddit, like most specifically the Donald. Here's the fucking problem, right? The shooter didn't fucking go on Reddit. He was on 8chan. Image board culture is quite far removed from Reddit culture. You're not going to see a lot of people actually coming from, the Donald and onto 8chan. People from 4chan hate the Donald, and people on the Donald either don't know there's such a thing as 8chan, or they hate it. Now, there's only one real way for things to happen if they were to shut down the Donald. the older people from the Donald, it is the biggest community of boomers on Reddit, but the older members would just go back to Facebook. It is the preferred social media site for boomers. The younger people, whose opinions might not be entirely friendly for Facebook, goes to even more radical places. They go to Vote and they go to Chans. And these places are the sort of places that the shooter frequented in the first place. So the people that are pushing for the closure of, these supposed hate subs will be shooting themselves in the foot. They will be the ones essentially causing these people to become even more radical. Okay, so let's move on from sort of political stuff. Let's talk about the other thing my friend wanted me to talk about, which is update on university life. To be honest, it's really dull for me. I go to class, I go home, sleep, and go back to class. Repeat for 5 days, take 2 days off to make shitty videos on YouTube, and then another 5 days. There are a lot of people who have very exciting lives for university. They go, they make shit tons of new friends. They join ridiculous clubs, and they have girlfriends, right? Which I'm not really doing any of those things. At least my grades aren't too bad, I think, so far. First semester is pretty good. Second semester, not so good. I don't know. For me, it's not different from high school by that much. I know for most people it is, but for me it's the same routine of waking up, going to class, going home, and repeating. It's just with different people and in a different place. And attendance is not mandatory, but I still try to show up for all the classes. Because I don't read. I don't read the course material. I don't revise. I can't be bothered, man. My time's more valuable than to be spent reading some fucking workbook, right? Let's be honest, time spent reading is time I could have spent playing video games or making shitty videos on YouTube. So I don't read. Bottom line is I don't read. And I suppose, part of the thing with not reading is if I don't go to class, I'll have no knowledge of the whole fucking course. So I show up to class, and I show up to pretty much all of them. I know most people, when they're in university, they have basically the opposite philosophy, where they'd spend, the time for class playing video games or, going out, which I don't do. But, that they'll spend that time as leisure time, and then they will spend their free time reading. That's not what I do. So far, I think what I do the way I do it works for me, man. But yeah, obviously it's different for different people. Some people are not gonna, some professors, and they're not gonna have a connection with you. You're not gonna learn from them very well. But for me, I still think it's better to show up to class. Tuition's not cheap, man. at least get some stuff out of that. Some people think I'm bullshitting them when I say I don't read. I really don't, man. If I don't get something, I'll try to read it, right? But once I get it, I just stop reading. That's it. I go back to playing. If I read something like 10 times and I still don't get it, I say, okay, fuck that. And I just leave it. And sometimes, reading something, I don't get it until I see the fucking exam, and suddenly, I go back to seeing the formula, I see the question, and then sometimes that missing link gets joined back, and I go, oh, that's how you do that. Maybe it's luck, but I think the secret to doing that is intuition. I think if you have good intuition, you could do well in pretty much any subject. And I believe myself to have very good intuition. It definitely helps with physics. And in theory, it should help with calculus, but my calculus grades aren't that good. Calculus is, it is something that you'd need a bit of practice with, because just getting that connection is not enough. You do have to also be able to have a few, I don't know, you have to have a bit of experience, I suppose, so you could know what to apply and when with calculus. But for physics, I think it's usually okay to just have a strong understanding of the concept, and then it's pretty easy to apply to the questions. Chemistry is pretty hard. Actually, it's pretty fucked. Really hard. I've been reading the molecular orbit stuff like 5 times, and I barely got it in the exam. But I think it's still kind of manageable. It's hard, but not too hard, and it should be easier after all the really, really complex theoretical stuff gets done, which is after the midterm. English has never been tough for me, so can't say much about that. It's funny that a strong intuition can actually help with language as well. Language is actually quite logical. Normally, we think of language as sort of art, right? It's artistic. And logic we normally apply to things like physics and math and chemistry and just science. But the truth is, when doing structured language, when we're when you're actually being tested on language, it's not quite as much an art as a science, right? So logic and intuition that follows logic can really help you with language. At least for me, I think that's how it works for me. Because again, intuition is the ability to make that connection in logic, A and C, and then you could infer that there might be B here, right?
So, and language has a lot of that. You got a lot of rules here. You got a lot of rules with grammar, with spelling, pronunciation, when to use words, right? And it's impossible to know them all, man. And it's not like you'd have a guidebook on language that you could take into the exam. So you do have to make sort of these logical connections in your head as you go along. You know, you'd read something and go, yeah, that doesn't quite fit in with, the way I interpret language logic. So yeah, intuition can help with language, man. So first semester I did computer programming, right, which was in Java. You could see my tutorials on that. They're not very good, man, but I don't know. They might help you to a certain extent. There are better tutorials, I think, but very few that are in Thai, so I made them. But yeah, first semester I took computer programming, and now I'm taking engineering graphics. Both actually benefit from intuition and logic. A lot of people get confused with both, right? For them, it's very complex. But actually, if you can make the connection, it becomes a lot simpler. In computer programming's case, you could make the connection between computer language to human language, and then to sort of brain processes, then it does become a lot simpler. The way you'd solve a computer programming question is you think about how you would do it in your head, right? You think about how you do that in your head, and then you translate that into programming language, taking into account, of course, the limitations of that programming language and the limitations of your coding knowledge and ability. And if you can do that, then it becomes fairly simple. Because usually the questions that you'd see in computer programming exams, it's not going to be super complicated. It's something you can do. If I take the questions, walked up to you and said, "Hey, can you help me with this?" Just in real life, just think it out. It's usually something that you could do, right? So, what's on the exam most of the time is just, what they want you to do is they want you to convert that brain process into computer language. So, and that, of course, can be helped if you think logically and have a strong intuition. Now, for engineering graphics, what I see a lot of people struggle with is when converting either three-dimensional images into orthographic projections, right? Turning 3D into 2D, or the inverse, turning 2D images into a 3D object. And again, this can be helped with a bit of intuition. There's a logic to doing all this, and if you can follow the logic, then it becomes a lot easier. There are a set of logic and there are a set of rules that says what you can and you cannot make from a given picture, and if you can go back and forth between the rules and sort of the images in your mind, it should be pretty easy. The process I make when I do 2D to 3D, right? I just come up with an object. I see it. What comes first in my mind? I think of that, and then I go through the rules of projection and see if my object would violate those rules. 99% of the time, it does. So I go back and make the tweaks necessary. But if you have a strong intuition and quick thinking, it shouldn't take you long, before you can get the right image. Let's say back in first semester, it was engineering graphics. You can probably guess I did pretty well on that one because I have a tutorial series on my channel. Strangely enough, there is a sort of logic to engineering materials. Did I say I said engineering graphics back there, didn't I? I meant engineering materials, sorry. There is a sort of logic and intuition that can be applied to engineering materials. A lot of it is just sort of making the connection between real world objects and scenarios and the theory described in materials. And if you can follow the logic, then it shouldn't be too hard to answer questions about these materials. So that's the academic part of university life. The non-academic part, I've been doing, I've sort of kind of involved with the, the TSAE club, student formula, Thailand Society of Automotive Engineers. You have a racing series for all the universities to participate. I don't have as much time as I'd like, so I can't join the club all the time. I just sort of drop by every now and then. It is a good experience though. It's pretty fun. You learn a lot of real world stuff about working with tools and working with machines and motors and vehicles. It's a good experience, and you work with cool cars. Driving their race car is unreal. It has a 600cc Honda CBR 600 double R engine, right? They're a super sport. It's actually an older one, so not that much power, and it has a restrictor on the air intake, so it makes even less power. But despite all those things, it is the most ridiculous experience you'll ever have, bearing a even more balls-to-walls race cars, but it is a very, very ridiculous experience just driving those things. Just letting the clutch out and letting the car sort of coast around. Even that is an insane experience. Because it's an open, it's an open cab racer. It doesn't have a roof and windows. It's open wheeled. The engine's right behind your back. It is very raw and unfiltered. As you go near the clutch and the throttle, you can actually smell the petrol coming out of the engine. The noise is also insane. And the level of connection you feel between you and the car is immense. And, it sort of ruins driving for you because you'll be hard-pressed to find a driving experience that connected ever again. As for other stuff, I I was staff for a camp. Nobody really remembered me. I don't really care. I sort of showed up and went home. It is a pretty shitty approach to being a camp staff, I suppose. And I was involved in the university parade for their sports event. I'm really proud of that, man. That was cool. My face also showed up on university, like, official university pictures. I even got on TV. It was like 5 seconds of my face being on the edge of TV as I walked past the camera. It was really cool. But yeah, I think that's about it for my university life, man. Anyway, since we were talking about race cars, let's talk a bit more about that. I am studying automotive engineering after all. So I watched a Top Gear video, new Top Gear with Chris Harris. He was driving the Porsche 919 Le Mans prototype race car. That was really cool. What I find particularly interesting was that it had a 4-cylinder, a V4, turbocharged, 2-liter powering the rear wheels. But it also had a electric system powering the front wheels. Now this is especially interesting because if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You see, an electric motor produces all the torque immediately, right? So you don't have to wait for the turbos to spool up, for the engines to get up to RPM. If you press on the accelerator in a car with an electric motor, all that power is there, and you go. Meanwhile, the engine, it will have to, especially because it's turbocharged, it will have to, take a while before it can produce power. So this concoction actually makes a lot of sense. Why? Because your engine revs would be going down when you brake into a corner. Now, when you go into a corner, you'd have to slow down, right? Otherwise, you'll just skid off. So you're coming in, you're braking for the corner, and as you hit the apex, you hit the accelerator. What's going to happen? Power is going to come from the front wheels first because that reacts faster. Meanwhile, you're just opening the throttle in the air intake for the engine, and that's beginning to rev up and powering your back wheels. But first and foremost, you're putting at the apex, once you start to put your foot down, you're putting that power to your front wheels. Why is this important? Because you're braking. You were just braking when you get into that, hit that apex. And braking is going to cause a weight transfer. Basic physics here, inertia, right? As a car's traveling, at a constant speed, if you were try to change that speed, the mass of the car would resist that change in speed. Rather velocity, to be more precise. But in this case, it's just semantics. But like I said, if you were trying to change the car's velocity, the mass would resist that change. What's going to happen? If you push a car, you want it to go faster, the weight transfer would send the center of mass to the back. That's going to put more weight on the rear wheels and put less weight on the front. The converse happens when you brake. Braking, the mass tries to resist. The inertia wants to go forward. So the center of mass goes to the front of the vehicle. And again, more weight is put on the front wheels and less is on the back wheels. Why is this important? Well, recall that friction is a function of normal force and friction coefficient. Now, coefficient of friction is not really something that would change. It can obviously change according to temperature and maybe contact patch, material type. Yes, but generally we just assume it to be constant. And so you can get more grip only by putting more weight on the surface. Now in a car tire you'd want a lot of friction. You'd want a lot of that. You want a lot of that grip, right? Friction is grip. And grip keeps you from sliding around, overshooting the corner, ending up in a field or crashing. So grip is good. And as we previously discussed, grip is a function of normal force. Normal force is the force that is pushing down on the wheel against the ground. Or rather, technically, is the force that the ground exerts back onto the wheel. But that is in proportion to the weight that the car would push onto the ground as well. Action, reaction, and all that. Point is, as weight is shifted towards the front of the car, it's going to increase grip up front and it's going to decrease grip in the back. And meanwhile, as you accelerate and the center of mass gets shifted back, grip at the front decreases and grip at the back increases. Now, going back to weight transfer during braking and accelerating, as you hit the apex, your weight is still at the front because you were just braking, right? You were braking. So your weight is at the front, pushing down on those wheels with the electric motor. So once you hit the accelerator and the electric motor spins up, you get all that torque and you have the grip ready to use all the power from the electric motor. But as the vehicle begins to accelerate, remember that torque goes down as RPMs increase, right? But so you'll get less power from the front wheels, but you have power already coming in from your back wheels, from the engine. So now, as the initial acceleration already happens, it's complemented and supplemented by the acceleration that's now coming from your internal combustion engine. So very, very cool bit of engineering there on Le Mans prototype race cars. There's a whole lot of tech in those things, and I can't understand all of them, but I think this bit is really cool. It's a cool piece of design. A really cool car as well. You should go watch the video. Stop watching this video. This video sucks ass. Go and watch Chris Harris drive a Porsche 919. That thing's amazing. Speaking of amazing cars, there's a whole lot of amazing car videos on YouTube, man. I was watching Jay Leno, right? Jay Leno is, honestly, he's a really cool guy. He owns a lot of these, really cool, really rare cars. And he's nice enough to show it to us. So we get a bit of a taste of what it's like to own, to drive, these cars. Otherwise we'd never even get to lay our hands on. So I'm just going to think of a few examples that I've seen, right? The first Jay Leno video I've seen in recent times was the turbine cars. He's got a Chrysler turbine car, and he actually custom built a turbine car, for himself, by himself, using a turbine engine from a helicopter. So turbine engines are like those engines you'd see in a jet, right? A jet is a type of turbine, jet turbines. Basically, they would draw air in, and that air would be compressed by a big fan compressor, and some fuel would be injected into this compressed air. That gets ignited and it spins up a turbine. That gets used to do the work, right? That will do the work in the engine. That either gets used to spool up electricity in the case of a a commercial turbine generator, or in the Chrysler gas turbine car's case, the work from the turbine is sent to the wheels, so that's directly used to propel the car. So compare and contrast a normal reciprocating engine, which has a piston and a crankcase, piston is it? It's got a lot of pistons normally. Small vehicles like, I have a single cylinder motorcycle, but most vehicles would have multiple cylinders, and these cylinders would be filled with air and fuel. The cylinder goes up to compress the air and fuel mixture, and then some form of ignition happens in the air-fuel mixture, and the expansion would drive the piston down, and that will be where the work happens. Whereas a gas turbine, there is a sort of continuous process where the gas coming in is ignited and used to do the work. So a gas turbine would be smoother. But because gas turbines draw in a lot of air, it's going to be very loud. Think of a jet engine. Jet engines are very, very loud. They're also unserviceable. By that I mean, think of a normal car. You can take that in for service, right? And there are thousands of parts in a car engine. Piston rings, pistons, con rods, tons of bearings, right? Crankshaft, balancers, injectors, valves, valve springs, camshafts, little bits of metal that holds the camshaft in place. But the thing about a normal reciprocating engine is all those parts can be replaced. And really the big part that can't be replaced is the engine block, but that's usually made out of iron, right, for most vehicles. I think most inline 4 vehicles have an iron block. Diesel vehicles always have an iron block, as far as I know, and iron blocks are basically indestructible, unless, maybe you get into a crash, somebody shoots your engine out, but, with general usage, iron blocks are indestructible. And aluminum engine blocks do fatigue over time, but the fatigue life is so high, it's usually not gonna ever be a concern. And all the other parts that would wear out can be replaced. Meanwhile, a gas turbine engine, it doesn't actually have as many parts. Normally we think of a jet engine as very, very complicated things, but in theory it's fairly simple. You've got a bunch of ducts that bring the fuel in, and got a few systems to ignite the fuel, but mainly the big part would be the big turbine wheel that spins up and draws air in. And that's also the most the part that's going to go. Right, you can replace the fuel systems, but once that turbine goes, the whole engine goes, and you'd have to get a whole new engine. But between that and the initial usage, it's usually gonna take a very, very long time, and it's gonna be very minimal service. Just go watch the Jay Leno video on turbine cars. It's really cool. He also built his own sports car with a gas turbine engine from a helicopter. That's ridiculous. Imagine if, it was a commercial success and people just started driving gas turbine sports cars everywhere. But seriously, watch that video, man. You'd get a sense of appreciation for engineering and just cars in general. Really cool. Second video from Jay Leno that I remember, I may have watched a few other ones. Lamborghini Diablo VT. I've always liked, well, not always, but for a fairly long time, I've liked the Lamborghini Diablo. The one he showcased, I don't remember, like the one that, I'm not sure if it was a VT. I think it was a VT. Yeah, there were a few variants of the Lamborghini Diablo: VT, SV, GT. Really weird looking race version as well. But I think that was a VT. 1991. I do remember the year. 1991, white with pop-up headlamps. 500 horsepower. Actually, 492 horsepower. But, it got a few tune-ups. So I would just say 500 horsepower from the V12 engine. It sounded amazing. It looked amazing. It's just a car I really like. If I have the money, I would get one in. I would get I was trying to get a Diablo GT in purple. I'm not a big fan of pop-up headlamps, but I am a big fan of the overall styling of the Diablo, and definitely I am a big fan of that exhaust node. If you've watched like a video, the thing with the Jay Leno video is they have some sort of super crazy mic that somehow is able to pick up the engine note. Normally when you watch a video of a souped up, super powerful car, the audio's all cracked because the car's really loud, right? So the mic is shorted out. It's like watching a video of an explosion or a gunshot. The mic's screwed up. But for Jay Leno's videos, the car's engine notes comes out perfectly clear. There's just a sort of it's almost orgasmic to hear the V12's engine note. They said I think in the video they said, everyone should drive a V12 at least once in their lives, and it's up there as one of my life's goals. Driving a Lamborghini Diablo. It has to be a Diablo. I don't know. I like the Countach and the Murcielago as well, but the Aventador doesn't do it for me, and especially not the newer ones. Seriously a big fan of the Diablo though. It looks really nice, sounds really nice, and maybe it doesn't drive that nice. I'm not sure. I've never driven one, of course, but still, man, driving one of those cars is not about. It's not just about driving experience for you. It is about flexing, but it is I suppose it's sort of generous flexing. Because a lot of people do enjoy seeing a Lamborghini. It does make people happy. It makes me happy at the very least, seeing cool cars. Let's move on. The latest video from Jay Leno I watched was what was it? A Corvair, actually. I actually got there from another video about the Corvair. So the Corvair was a vehicle that General Motors, parent company of Chevrolet, released in about the 1960s. And unlike most American cars, in fact, unlike most cars, it had the engine in the back. Normally, in a normal passenger car, we'd have an engine in the front, right? We'd have the engine in the front. It's going to be cooled by some sort of liquid that runs through the engine block. In this case, the engine was cooled by air and was placed in the back. The engine was also significantly smaller than most American cars, but it still took up sort of trunk space, right? So they'd have to design a suspension around the engine. And this caused a few, handling characteristics that cannot be entirely described as desirable. Here's what happened, right? They used a swing axle, I believe, and that sort of suspension design, coupled with the fact that you'd have a lot of weight in the back, meant the vehicle was very prone to, fairly prone, I believe, to oversteer. If you were to do a very sudden maneuver, suddenly the camber angle on the rear wheels would change into a lot of positive camber on one wheel as weight transfer, that word again, right? Weight transfer. As weight transfer caused the vehicle to rock to one side. Now, if you were to try to recover after the sudden maneuver now, the weight would suddenly shift to the other side. And basically you'd have a sudden loss of grip on the rear wheels with the weird, swing axle design. So, and what you get when you lose rear traction is oversteer. Okay, so let's explain oversteer and understeer, right? So a passenger vehicle would have 4 tires. 2 at the front and 2 at the back, right? For basically every car. Obviously there are a few outliers with 6 or 3 or whatever, but in this case we're just talking about 2 at the front, 2 at the back. Now, as previously discussed when I was talking about the Le Mans prototype racer, traction is very important, right? Traction keeps the car planted, keeps it from swinging about and crashing. Now, if you were going into a corner, right, you're turning, recall in physics class there is something called centripetal force. And this force has to counteract, it has to balance out the force of inertia. The force of inertia would want to push the car outward. Now, the required centripetal force to keep a vehicle, or indeed any object, in a circular motion increases as a square of the speed, right? It's mv squared divided by r. Anyway, so, which is why it's more dangerous to go fast. Now, as you drive, that centripetal force, generally speaking, would come from grip from the tires and the ground. And if you think about a vehicle that is taking a corner at very, very high speeds, that required centripetal force is also going to be very, very high. In some cases, the centripetal force required to keep the vehicle going in that desired arc is going to be greater than the centripetal force that could actually be provided to can actually be provided by the tires. And what's going to happen is the wheels are going to lose traction. Now, back to the thing about four wheels. If you lose traction in your front wheels, the wheels that do the steering, what's going to happen is the rest of the car is going to plow right through, based on inertia, without basically giving a damn about your desired steering input. Which means you're going to steer less than you want to. This is called understeer, because you're steering less or under what you intend. However, if you were to lose traction in your rear wheels, inertia, again, is going to push the rear of the vehicle outside of the circular path. Now, if the rear of the vehicle were to be pushed outside, it would have the effect of pointing the front of the car inside. So the front of the car is now pointed closer towards, pointed inwards of the intended arc. So it has an effect of making the vehicle turn more than you intend. This is called oversteer because you're steering more than you intend to. Most vehicles that are sold, commercially understeer, whereas the Corvair oversteered. And this led a lawyer by the name of Ralph Nader to write a book about how American cars are unsafe. His book was called Unsafe at Any Speed, and it argued that because of how they were designed, several American cars are fundamentally unsafe no matter, regardless of how fast they were driven. The Corvair was one of the cars that was called out by the book. And as a result, the sales of the Corvair dropped. Jay Leno's video on the Corvair was about a special edition of the Corvair with a tuned-up engine and brakes that were fiddled with, and they were intended to go racing. They were tuned by a legendary Chevrolet tuner by the name of Yenko. He also makes those Yenko Camaros. It really was a beautiful car. It still is, actually. It looks great. The engine now makes 190 horsepower, and it sounds pretty cool, but the thing about the Corvair is that it just has these unique looks to it, and when done right, they can be very, very pretty cars, man. I wouldn't mind driving one, though I definitely wouldn't mind owning one. I would imagine owning a Corvair in Thailand in, over half a century after it was built. I would imagine it to be quite a pleasant experience. Let's talk a bit more about the oversteer, understeer thing. Normally, passenger cars understeer. The thing about understeer, though, is that it's pretty easy to recover from. Why is that? Well, remember, understeer is caused by loss of front traction, right? Now, our first instinct as drivers, if we realize that our vehicle is no longer under our control is we're going to slam on the brakes. Now, as you brake, you're going to shift weight over to the front, right? Remember inertia, right? So weight is now at the front. When you put weight at the front, it's going to push down on your front wheels. And that's going to result in your wheels regaining traction. And because of that, understeer in general is a lot easier to control than oversteer. If you were to try a similar thing in an oversteer situation, what's going to happen is you're going to shift more weight over to the front wheels, and that's going to cause the problem to get worse, as you'd have even less traction on the rear wheels. So that's why most commercial, passenger vehicles vehicles that are commercially sold, are designed to understeer. And that's why the Corvair was said to be unsafe, because it didn't behave like a normal vehicle. Anyway, so I think that's enough of nerding about cars. I don't know. Maybe later in the video I'll come back and talk even more about cars, because I do like talking about them. But that's talking about cars. I gotta figure out what to talk about next. I know I said I was done with talking about politics, but there's just so much shit to talk about, isn't there? I know everybody's serious about the pre-elections and the scandal, the pre-scandal. I'm sure the real election would be much worse, but let's talk about things that aren't that, shall we? There was a very prominent feminist, self-proclaimed, of course. Did he ever claim he was feminist? I don't know. He's a guy. Well, is he transgender? The point is, he's a guy who, talks about social justice. He's Thai. He's a Thai who talks about social justice. Now, the thing is, right? Obviously, fundamentally, social justice, but the idea is you're helping people who are marginalized, right? You're helping people who are being unfairly treated by society. Now, here's the thing. This person, he was criticizing memers, right? See, Thai people, we sort of took a gashimuchi video of a guy dancing, Ricardo Milo, and made our own spin on that. It was previously memed on by foreign memers, but when it came to Thailand, it had a slightly different spin, because Ricardo Milo, back then at least, looked quite a lot like Thai musician, for Thai former musician, I suppose. Now he's a religious fundamentalist and meat salesman. Fabulous country out here. But yeah, so that became a meme in our country, and social justice man was not pleased with the meme, because to him this man who has been memed on by basically everyone around the world, fully embraces the meme and enjoys people laughing. This guy, he's somehow a victim. And social justice man saw it to be his duty to protect both Ricardo Milo, who basically was not affected at all, and religious fundamentalist musician who, knowing, the beliefs of his religion, probably would have preferred social justice man to be thrown from a building. But yeah, so social justice man was saying that the memers are horrible homophobics, and they were harassing the Ricardo Milo. Me personally, what I find to be weird about the whole ordeal is that this same person, social justice man, is a very staunch critic of the idol group BNK45, specifically the some of the more famous members. Now here's the thing, right? If you're a feminist, should you be defending a man while attacking, a woman? Would that be in line with feminist ideals? I don't know, right? This is a question I'm posing. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it is something to think about. Now, if you're social justice, you're dealing with people who are being unfairly treated. Is it okay to attack someone who didn't ask to be attacked, who didn't even say anything that attacked other people, while defending somebody who fully embraced and I don't know if fully embraced, but he does have a gaming channel on Twitch, so he can't be that badly affected by the whole thing. So is it okay to attack somebody who didn't ask to be harassed, while defending somebody who didn't ask to be defended? Is that social justice? And if you're a fucking feminist, right, should you be attacking women for working in entertainment? Should you be attacking women for working? Well, it's the next step for, Thai social justice be saying women just belong in the fucking kitchen. Women should be at home, not working, not being on TV. Well, that's clearly not what they want, because they supported a woman for president. Oh my god, I can't say that. That is very, very wrong. We do not have a president. They supported a woman prime minister. So clearly they're not against the whole idea of, women working or women being in the spotlight. So what the hell are they against? I think everyone sort of knows the answer, but they don't want to say it, do they? But yeah, I don't think it's quite in line with, social justice or feminism to be attacking a woman for, well, basically for doing nothing. Like, at least when the exiled professor, the gay one, not the one with white hair, attacked a slightly more prominent member of the same idol group, that was slightly more justified, because she actually did something. She went out and she was participating in a junta sponsored TV show. So maybe that's grounds for attacking. But what did the other member do? Jack shit. And yet you have these supposed feminists attacking her. It's ridiculous. It's completely dumb. Since we are on the topic of BNK, let's talk about a really dumb, fucking annoying post I've seen. Seen a lot of times actually, because people keep sharing it. And actually the sentiment on the post is also quite common. You know how BNK is everywhere these days? You go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, you go on YouTube. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty on YouTube as well. But like you go on those places, right, and it's just full of idle content. And that's fine and good if you like idols. What about people who don't? Right? There's plenty of people who don't like idols, right? I'm not a big fan. I don't really care. Like, I am genuinely apathetic about idols. I don't listen to their songs, but I'm fine with seeing them on my timeline. I don't hate them. There are people who genuinely hate them. To those people I say, it's not that healthy to live your life with so much hatred. But yeah, so there's a lot of BNK around the world these days. And the solution proposed in that post that keeps getting shared is, well, if you don't like it, just don't look at it. Just block the pages that shares these things. Here's the fucking thing, right? It's not just pages about idols that shares these things. You have pages about other things as well. You've got, mobile phone pages. Because they do tie-ins with Samsung now. So you can see those. They tie in with Toyota. So you'd see those. Are you supposed to block those as well? No, right? Because that'd be fucking stupid. So no matter what you do, you're forced to look at, idol faces. And it does get to a point where you're fucking annoyed. But here's the thing. Facebook posts aren't the worst. You can scroll past them. And it is usually not that bad. The really bad one is the radio ad. How the fuck are you supposed to block that, you fuck? Yeah, there's a radio ad. Because, again, the Toyota ties in with idols to sell their new Yaris, right? And they run ads for that on the radio. So you're driving along, you're enjoying, hey, I'm driving. There's at least one place where I'm not forced to look at idols. And the fucking ad comes on the radio. There really is no place where you can run away from them. And the thing about people who like idols is they don't quite understand how prevalent depictions of idols are in modern society. You can't turn a corner without seeing them. And so they come up with silly solutions like, you don't like it, just don't look at it. Just block the pages that post idle content. But you can't fucking do that because it's every single fucking page. It's fucking insane. I know this is gonna come off like I hate idols. I genuinely don't hate them, but there's just It's too much. Like, when it gets to the point where I can't get in a car without having to hear about idols, I think it's a bit too much. There should be a point where we just tell them to stop. Stop, that's enough. At some point that has to happen. Please. Let's go back and talk about politics. This election cycle for Thailand is bullshit. There were hundreds of opportunities where we could have, taken a look back at it and realized, well, actually, the election they're putting together it's kind of a sham. But we didn't do that. We just sort of looked at the big picture and said, oh yeah, we're getting an election soon. And we get excited, we get outraged every time there's a little scandal involved in the, surrounding the election. But we never made the connection that all these scandals put together means that this election will be entirely undemocratic. This election will be set up in a way that if you're not voting for the junta, you lose. The thing is, I think deep down we all know that. There's just too much evidence to the contrary, to still believe in the sanctity of this election. But we don't want to admit it. We don't want to admit it to ourselves. We don't want to admit it to other people. We don't want to admit that, actually just getting an election isn't enough. Just getting an election isn't going to allow the will of the people to be heard in the government. It's hard to admit that this election is just a cover for whatever the fuck they're doing in the background. It's uncomfortable, it's inconvenient. And it's hard to accept the fact that something we've waited for so long for is not going to matter. I'll give you a brief forecast of the next 4 years. More of the same. Because deep down you know who's going to win. It's set up in a way that he cannot lose. So why bother? Why should you bother? Right? I'm not saying everyone should become cynics and just stay at home. But don't get your hopes up. Don't expect anything. I know deep down you don't expect anything. You shouldn't. Yeah, what I'm saying is go out and vote. Sure, do what you will. But don't expect anything. Vote knowing full well that no matter who you vote for, the winner has already been decided. That's what you ought to do. The especially funny thing is the people that are in the junta's political party are complete fucking sacks of shit. Let me put it this way, right? If you're voting for the junta, you obviously hate Thaksin, right? The former Prime Minister. slash businessman who did the scandal about his businesses, got kicked out. That man, he big bad guy for you, right? You know how many of Plampashara people come from Thaksin's party? Go fucking count. Look at your own fucking area. Count how many sacks of shit that you are voting for are people you previously fucking despised. Fuck off. Fucking idiot. Also equally stupid are people who are actually surprised that the election is being handled in such a silly manner. Let me put it this way, right? If an election, if all the stuff that surrounds the election looks like it's more appropriate for a child's playtime, that's a sign that the election is actually child's play. You know what I mean? Think about that. Let me put it this way. If you're an adult and you're putting together tea time for a bunch of children, it's not serious tea time. You just want them to get together, just, have childish fun. But at the end of the day, you're going to pack everything up and then give your kids dinner. Would you bring out an expensive set of china for, the kids' tea time? You won't, right? You'd use childish toys. And, everything would be handled in a way that would befit a child. Now, imagine if the people that are in charge of the election are the adults. The voters are the children. I think it shouldn't be too hard to get my analogy here. Alright, now, the thing, right? I said, as I said, this is kind of unpopular. This kind of is an unpopular opinion. Did I say that before? I don't know. Yeah, this is ridiculously unpopular. And if you try to say it, people will disagree with you. They'll be quick to attack you. If you try to say, it doesn't actually matter, is it? You know who's going to win. They'll try to defend the sanctity of this election cycle. They shouldn't. It's all shit. The thing is, if you've read, what's the book? The book written by the jackass, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He talks about finance, right? He says it's easy to be successful financially if you treat it like a game. If you don't take it too seriously, you'll find it easy to be successful financially. Now, I can't vouch for finance. Right? I can't vouch for financial success. But I can vouch for academic success. I don't take it seriously and I'm doing pretty well. So clearly there is some truth to this, right? If you don't take things too seriously, you'll be able to come up with a more creative solution and you'll do well. The point here is you shouldn't take the election too seriously, alright? Just, you'll pop a vein. Just take it like a joke. Take it like a child's tea time. You'll have a bit of a sense of humor, at least. Just laugh while the world falls apart around you. It's what American people are doing as well. You got these, right-wingers actually supporting Andrew Yang because, society's going to shit anyway. Why not just have a bit of fun while you're at it? I'm kind of going all over the place with this one and this video in general, so let's change topic. This video is kind of going all over the place. That's because I sort of record parts that I can come up with, I record a few sections separately. Maybe it'll show up in editing where it's really clear where I made the cut, but I record sections separately because at some point I run out of ideas of what to talk about. It's hard to talk by yourself for this video, which I finished recording. It's 3 hours and 23 minutes. That's 203 minutes. And it's really, really hard to talk for that long by yourself. So yeah, if you notice, the video is sort of jumping back and forth between all sorts of things, this is the reason. So where should we go next? Let's talk about tech, actually. So phones. Yeah, phones. Samsung just killed off their J line and replaced it entirely with A series, which I think is a good move for the company. The J series has always been awful. You're paying a lot of money and you're not getting a lot of phone. The problem is when people buy things, phones especially, they expect, if they buy a 10,000 baht phone, they expect that phone to be as fast as a phone that's 10,000 baht from a different brand, right? It is a good amount of money to spend on a phone, and obviously they'd have a level of expectation for that. The problem is the processor in J series phones are so dog shit that even if they put in 4 gigs of RAM and a ton of storage, it's still not enough to counteract the fact that the processor is shit. So you end up with people going on, mobile gaming forums and groups and talking about, oh, I just got this sweet new phone. Why the fuck does the game lag? Because you bought a fucking Samsung, my guy. Fuck. True fact here. I bought a OnePlus, right? It's a OnePlus 5T. So as of recording, it's over a year old. It's 2 whole product launches behind and about to be 3, right? So the processor is already 2 silicon cycles behind, but whenever I play a PUBG Mobile, or I let my friends play PUBG Mobile rather, they're still impressed by how smooth it is, and invariably these people come from Samsung phones. And it is unbelievable. how awful Samsung phones, even their top range, S series phones tend to be at gaming, especially when when you're used to computer gaming or gaming on a smoother device. Part of it might be their chip, their processor. The Samsung uses a Snapdragon. No, Samsung's in the time market. Samsung's use their own Exynos chip, right? Whereas my phone uses a Snapdragon chip. Now, I can't pinpoint the exact cause, but point is, Samsung phones don't run games smoothly. It becomes noticeable if you're going from, say, OnePlus and into basically any other Samsung. You notice that the graphics jump around is entirely unbearable. You will not understand why people tolerate this stuff. Like even my older OnePlus 3, is it 3 or 3T? 3T, yeah. My older OnePlus 3T, I let my friend play it on it, and he was still impressed with how smooth that one was. And for me, the OnePlus 3T is unplayable. It's just too laggy. Like, how can a brand of mobile phones be so bad that people who use it have a severely diminished sense of how smooth a game should run? It's unbelievable. And they would say, oh yeah, with these settings the game runs just fine on my phone. And then I'd go and play it, I'd borrow their phone, play it, and it's unbearable. It's awful. It's a horrible experience. And it's just, and they can't pinpoint why. It's ridiculous how bad Samsung phones are at gaming. While we're at bad phones, let's talk about Oppo. Yes, they're OnePlus's parent company, but their own phones suck so much ass. Specifically their F series phones. The worst offender is the F5. The reason being, they made an F5 which had if I remember correctly, it was a Helios P60, which is a sort of a mid-range MediaTek processor. It's fine, I guess, but it's obviously not going to be designed for cranking out extreme frame rates for video games. Now, they released that, and if I remember correctly, there were 3 variants. There was a youth variant with 3 gigs of RAM. That was the normal variant with 4 gigs of RAM. But the one that I think is an awful phone is the F5 Pro, which had 6 gigabytes of RAM. Here's the thing about RAM. Right, and it doesn't matter if it's a graphics card RAM, it's a phone RAM, or a computer RAM. This is true for all RAM. Okay? RAM will only make your computer or graphics card or phone faster if and only if prior to this you were using all of your RAM. Okay, modern memory management systems are very, very good. Okay, if you have 2 gigs of RAM, the system will try to limit and use up, the available RAM as efficiently as possible. The same if you have 4, the same if you have 6 and 8 gigs of RAM. Now, here's the deal, right? If you use if you used up all 2 gigs of RAM with your phone and you upgrade to a phone with 4 gigs of RAM, all else equal, you'll notice an improvement in speed. If, again, you open a lot of apps and you play games on it at the same time, you use up more than 4 gigs of RAM, you move up to 6, then you'll notice an improvement. Right? And same is true if you use up all 6, you move to 8, 10, 12, so on. This would be true. Here's the problem. There is a principle with performance of any sort of multi-part system, be it a engine or a computer or indeed a phone. And it's called bottlenecking. The idea is the total, performance output is only as good as the maximum performance of the weakest part. It's similar to, what people say when they say, chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Imagine if your phone or your computer is a chain and it has to pull a really heavy load, and so the chain is made up of RAM, it's made up of your processor, it's made up of your graphics processor, so on, right? And whatever's the weakest part of that is going to limit how much force you can use to pull. Back to the F5 with 6 gigabytes of RAM. What's going to be the bigger bottleneck? RAM or the Helios P60? It's going to be the shitty MediaTek processor, right? That's going to be the weakest link. So now you get a chain with a really powerful, really thick chain with one really thick segment, of 6 gigabytes of RAM. But the other one is really, really thin and weak. It's that little plastic toy chain thing. And that's your the graphics processor on the Helios P60. So what's going to happen when you try to use that to run PUBG? The fucking plastic chain is going to struggle. So now what's going to happen is you paid about 12,000 baht for a phone that will lag in PUBG Mobile, and you can't fathom why. You spent a lot of money, you should be getting performance. You have 6 gigs of RAM. The game is clearly unoptimized. No, the game's not unoptimized, you're just fucking dumb. That's the thing. RAM, a lot of RAM sounds good. But people don't understand how RAM affects, improvements. If you're not using all the RAM you currently have, you will not notice an improvement. If you currently have 6 gigs of RAM, you're using 3, you upgrade to 8, you're still going to be using 3 gigs of RAM. You're not going to notice it. And if you can have 200 gigs of RAM if you're using a weak processor, it's not going to make your phone faster. But it's hard to understand phone processors, right? It's hard to understand that a phone is the sum of its components. The most important part of a phone is the overall user experience. Not, a few numbers, not how much RAM it has, not the CPU clock speed, not how many cores it has. It's how the phone feels, overall when you've used it. But that's not something that could easily be advertised. What's easily advertised is RAM. You can put up a sign, say, Oh, 6 gigs of RAM. Look at that iPhone, only 3 gigs. But what's going to deliver the better experience? It's going to be the iPhone, right? That's the thing. And now with Xiaomi, you're getting a different sort of angle for advertisement. They're no longer selling by RAM, they're now selling by processor. But in putting in a good processor, they often skip over other aspects. They're putting in a weak camera. They put in a weak battery that cannot support quick charge. And yes, you get a good processor, but again, those other aspects of the user experience is struggling. But at least you don't get people who buy Xiaomi's going around saying, "Oh, this phone sucks, it can't run any games." So at least that part is good. I think newer Oppos are pretty good though. The F9 in particular, because it has quick charge, I think that's a very good phone. Being able to charge quickly is always a good thing, which is part of why I am very, very happy I chose OnePlus. The thing is, yes, this OnePlus has 8 gigs of RAM. That seems like something you just never be able to use, and frankly, it's true. You'll never use up 8 gigs of RAM. You'll never use up 6. Huh? At least, as of right now, you won't use up 6 gigs of RAM. But as an overall package, the OnePlus 5T is a good phone. The camera is not, it's not going to beat other phones in the sort of flagship segment, but I don't take that many pictures, and for the ones I do take, I think it's serviceable. It's entirely acceptable. Unlike Xiaomi's camera, I've used Xiaomi's. The camera is jack shit. The camera is awful on Xiaomi's. It's gotten a bit better from back when I had one, but I think overall they're still pretty weak. Anyway, back to the OnePlus 5T, right? The camera is serviceable. The screen is good. The processor, of course, is good. And it charges quickly. But the thing I'm most impressed with, actually, is the UI, right? Because I've used Xiaomi's before, as I've said, and to be honest, I'm not a fan of MIUI, their user interface. A lot of people like it. I think it's too in a weird way, it's too complicated. And this sounds weird, right? Because obviously it sounds, I can't put this quite properly, but obviously I'm capable of complicated things that, things much more complicated than setting up a Xiaomi, but there is just some layer of unneeded complicatedness with MIUI compared to a user interface that more closely resembles stock Android, like Oxygen OS. Part of the reason why iPhones are so successful, I think, is because it's easy to use. Everything's where it should be. It's very intuitive. That, in my opinion, is what you're paying for. The phone is good, it's put together well, but what you're really paying for is the software with an iPhone. You're paying for that extra bit of polishedness. When you pick up an iPhone, you set it up, you sort of know where everything is. And that's because they did spend all that time and money into putting together the most easy to use operating system. And to be honest, Androids don't do that. Their menus are all over the fucking place. Which they shouldn't be. Stock Android, if you've used, light Androids or, UIs that more closely follow stock Android, again, like Oxygen OS, they're easy to use. Things are where it should be. These companies that develop their own UI are actually spending money into making their products harder to use. Well, at least to me. I'm sure there are people who prefer those UIs to stock Android, but I really don't understand them. Why? It's just so unintuitive. Where was I? Yeah, the OnePlus 5T overall, as a package, is a very pleasant user experience. For me. I'm sure there are people that would disagree. That if you take a lot of pictures, I don't think you'd be too impressed with the camera quality. But for me, it does everything I need it to. It still plays the games I want to play very smoothly. It goes on the internet smoothly. And after a gaming session, I can plug it in, charge up quickly, and it's ready to go again. And to be honest, I don't think I'd be able to get that with a Xiaomi. Definitely not with an Oppo. They just don't quite deliver the same kind of user experience, man. And user experience is what matters with phones. It's why, Antutu version 7 now has a separate score for user experience. It is that valuable. So fairly briefly, I've touched on, me watching traffic accident videos earlier in the video. And, so watching those videos do tend to teach you about what you should and shouldn't do in traffic. And what you realize quite quickly after watching those videos is the absolute worst thing you can assume, the absolute worst thing you can do is assume it's safe to do something. It's safe for you to maneuver. Because oftentimes it turns out that it isn't. Yes, legally you have right of way. Yes, you're legally right and he's wrong. But is that going to matter if he plows in through you and you fucking die? It's not. It's not going to matter. So that's the thing, right? When you drive, you should always expect other people to break the law. Don't just assume that, everyone's going to follow the law. Don't just assume that, because you're right, the whole world will be right just like you are. Because you'll be proven wrong. And you can die. Here's an example, okay? So, one video I've watched was a guy in a car, right? It was a Mercedes-Benz C-Class, not the latest gen, the earlier one, right? They were coming up. He was at a green light at an intersection, and he had a green light, so he went. But there was a motorcycle that ran a red light, and they crashed, right? And the Mercedes, of course, caught that on dash cam. Here's the thing, and the comments, of course, were talking about
but motorcycle guy deserved it for running a red light, blah blah blah. And the thing is, right, in this case, the vehicle that had right of way, the vehicle that was right, was bigger, and the vehicle that was breaking the law was small. It was a little motorcycle, so that thing got yeeted across the intersection. The rider was okay though, but the guy that was doing the right thing wasn't hurt. But think of how easily it could have been a car versus another car. Might have been hurt there. And the worse, what if it was a big vehicle? What if it was a truck, a 10-wheeler, 18-wheeler? You wouldn't be living to post a video on Facebook. You'd be dead. And it happens. You got these 18-wheelers and they can't quickly stop, so sometimes you just plow right through intersections. What if, what's going to happen if you just see a green and you fucking gun it? You're going to die. So you can't assume that because it's legal for you to move, you should move. Always verify, right? Verify with your eyes. First, trust your eyes, not trust the law. The law saves you if you're alive and you're looking for somebody to pay for insurance. The law won't save you if you're dead. Alright, the law's not gonna, come out from under an 18-wheeler and somehow just, punch it like in JoJo until you're safe. It's not gonna happen. You're gonna die. You're gonna be crushed flat. And then your family could, go out and try to claim compensation from the truck driver. But that's not going to help you, is it? Because you'd be fucking dead. Right? So remember, okay? Never assume something is safe. You have to be responsible for not crashing. Because there will be people who break the law. You cannot expect everyone else in the world to be law-abiding people. You could want other people to be law-abiding people. You should want other people to be law-abiding people. And you should be a law-abiding person. But if you live life expecting other people to abide by the law and keep you safe, you're going to end up under an 18-wheeler. And that, to be honest, applies to a lot more than just traffic. You see it a lot. People will talk about crime. People will talk about murders, robberies and rape. And every single one of those times, the fault lies entirely, of course, on the person who perpetrated it. It's not your fault. It's not your fault you got killed. Not your fault you got robbed. Not your fault you got raped. And yet, the world we live in, we cannot expect people, we cannot expect every single person that will exist on this planet. We cannot expect them to not be murderers. We cannot expect all of them to not be robbers. We cannot expect all of them to not be rapists. And because of that, you should be able to look out for yourself. Because that is an important thing. That is a very important thing. I saw this argument earlier about, it was saying how Thailand is this horrible country with lots of crime, right? And well, earlier there was people talking about how Thailand is this horrible country with lots of crime. And there were people who disagreed, and they said, well, actually, other countries have crime as well. And the people that were, deriding the country, deriding Thailand, were replying with, yes, other countries have crime, but the difference is the criminal is caught and punished. But again, here's the thing. If you're murdered, is it gonna make you any less murdered if your killer was caught and jailed, as opposed to if your killer was not? Because I don't think so. Laws can only help you so much. Laws don't help dead people. Laws can't unrape you. Laws might sometimes be able to return your stolen items from you, but don't expect it. So ultimately, who's going to be responsible for your own safety? It's you. You have to be responsible for yourself not being murdered. You have to be responsible for yourself not being robbed. You have to be responsible for yourself not being raped. Just as you have to be responsible for you not getting into a traffic accident. It's not something, that should be entirely your responsibility, right? Of course we should we should want, other people in society to not commit those things, to not kill, to not rob, to not rape, and to not, disregard traffic laws. But because it will never be guaranteed that there will, because you cannot guarantee that there won't be people that do these things, you have to take the necessary precautions to try and minimize the risk of yourself getting into those situations. For driving, it means even if you get a green light, you look at the other side of the intersection first. For everything else, well, you'll have to be able to identify high-risk situations and get out of them, right? You have to be able to defend yourself. Because the thing is, if you're not responsible for yourself, then you have to have other people be responsible for you. That person, if you're young, this is fine, that person could be your parents, right? But as you grow older, of course, you can't rely for your parents for everything, right? And if you are an adult, but you're still not responsible for yourself, well, someone else has to be. And the worst possible option is for society to be the ones that are responsible for your safety, because, well, frankly, society will not be responsible. It's kind of interesting because when you think about it, right, you go through life, as a single person, you will have to meet, you have to, interact with all those people. Some people will be bad people, right? And to paraphrase the Irish Republican Army,
an Irish separatist group that was active during the 20th century in the UK. In a letter they sent to the Prime Minister of the UK, Margaret Thatcher, they said something to the tune of, "We only have to be lucky once. You have to be lucky all the time." And that's the thing, right? It only takes one small misstep for you, and all the bad people suddenly win. It ties back into what I said way back at the beginning of this video, where life is actually something that can slip away from you at a very short notice. You really do have to be lucky every day of your life just to be alive. And the bad people only have to be lucky once, and they can end everything for you. Can you improve your odds? Is there a way to make yourself luckier? Yes. Yes, there are. There are many ways to do that. The one I actually closely align with the most is the American way of improving your chances at survival. They carry a gun. It works. Of course, I can't carry a gun, but that would be really the logical way. It is the only way you can ensure that, the bad people in the world, barring, some sort of ridiculous heavy artillery or missile strike, a gun is a sure way of ensuring that the bad people of the world will have a much worse chance against you. And it is a shame that, today very few people appreciate the power of the gun. Everyone's trying to take it away from the good people. Frankly, taking away the gun from good people will only cause it to end up in bad people. I know it's a cliched argument for pro-gun people to make, but it is true. And all these policies end up doing is, instead of increasing the chances for the good people, instead it increases the chances for the bad people. And again, they only have to be lucky once. The good people, they have to be lucky all the time. I know in some, I know it's a recent event, it's too soon to talk about, blah, blah, blah. But the events at New Zealand really wouldn't happen if the people were armed. You can see people talk about it in America, right? They go up to they talk about it in their church, and they realize it really couldn't have happened in America, because in an American church there are a lot of armed people. Even the pastor has a gun. Because the American people know the value of personal responsibility. They know the value of defending themselves. Because fundamentally, American culture doesn't place much of a importance on the government, right? So it is a lot of that responsibility is placed on them. And that does include their own safety. So you see all these people in America with guns. And meanwhile, New Zealand, with fairly lax gun laws, despite that, the bad people of the world still manage to find a place where, people aren't likely to be armed and use that to attack. Alright, so this is hopefully the last thing I'll talk about, and it's gonna be education. Alright, so I've touched on education before when I talked about university life, right? But this time let's talk about education system as a whole. Thailand, Thai people often talk about how Thailand's education system ranks as one of the worst in the world. And I don't know if that's true or not. Because frankly, I spend a lot of time on the internet, right? And I interact with people from all over the world. And when you interact with people from so many places together, you get a very, very stunning realization. Everyone from everywhere has the tendency to be stupid. Every country will have their stupid people. Every country thinks their education sucks. Every country thinks their government sucks. Every country thinks their country is full of crime and drugs and homelessness and violence. Obviously, objective reality, right? If you were to count numbers of crime, you'll find that obviously not everywhere on Earth has the same crime rate. But the fact still remains that basically everybody on Earth is not happy with the way things are for them. And that includes education. Now, detractors of Thai education love, and I do mean love, to push for a very specific solution to their education problem. Finland. They love to point out how Finland has no homework, no exams, no grades, and how their education is the best in the world. Here's the funny thing, alright? Finland people, Finnish youth at least, have a ridiculously high suicide rate. Now, if their education was so good, why is their suicide rate somewhere around 10 times that of our country? For youths that are in education age. Why is that? Surely they don't have homework and they don't have exams, so they shouldn't be stressed out. They shouldn't be hanging themselves. Thai kids, on the other hand, some fucking study found that Thai kids are the most bullied. They have the most number of exams in the world, based on some fucking horseshit statistic, probably. And we have all these homework, right? So where are all the teenage suicides? Clearly, there's more to it, right? Clearly, there's more to this stuff than posting a fucking picture of how good Finland education is. And the thing is, right? When they support these education things, they always point to one thing being the cause of the problem, right? And that's the system. They blame the education system. But here's the thing, it's easy to blame a system, because a system is made up of so many parts, right? And you don't have to pinpoint a real problem. You don't have to say that teachers are ineffective or undereducated. You don't have to say that students are uninspired, lack motivation, don't fucking study. You don't have to do those things. You can just say, oh, actually, it's, our system is bad. But the thing is, it doesn't actually mean shit. And after they say that the system is somehow the cause of all of the education woes, they'll point to Finland as a savior, as the model we should be following with our education system. Oftentimes they'll bring up this really cool shot. They'll bring up like a table of countries by homework hours or exam count, and they'll rank them. Like they'll say Finland number 1, 0 homework, 0 exams. Then talk about, and then I think China's around number 3, or maybe South Korea. But you got China and South Korea up there as well. And top 10, and then they'll put Thailand. I think Thailand's somewhere around 100 something. And they'll say, oh, Thailand, look, they have 200,000 hours of homework and 4 billion exams. This is clearly Thailand sucks, because unlike Finland, we have a lot of homework, a lot of exams. But then when they make this, they'll ignore China and South Korea, who clearly have a lot of fucking studying. They have a lot of homework. They have a lot of exams. The Chinese education system is some of the most cruel. They're some of the most tiring. It's like a fucking endurance test. The Chinese education system is ridiculously strict. And Chinese culture is also the most similar to that of Thai culture in all those countries. You compare, Thai culture, Chinese culture, pretty similar. Thai culture, South Korean culture, fairly similar. Thai culture, Finland culture, what the fuck? There's nothing in common. You really expect, just throw a Finland education system at Thai culture and you think it'll just go just like Finland education and Finland culture? You're fucking delusional. You're fucking stupid. You don't see those education reform type kids talking about how we should have a more strict education system like that of China. They're always pushing for less strict. They're always pushing for less learning, less education. They're always coming up with those neat pictures of Finland classrooms and happy kids. They ignore the fact that Shanghai outperforms everyone else by a ridiculous margin. And the only reason they could do that is because they almost literally beat the shit out of their children until they could read every fucking language on earth. It's easy, right? It's convenient to ignore those and just point towards the example that you want. But the reality of it is, if you were to take some fancy, free approach to education and put it in Thailand, the people getting educated would act the same way. And what's going to end up happening? You got the people that do respond well to education. They're gonna learn. But the people that aren't giving a fuck about class in the first place, are they gonna learn? Are they? Here's the problem. When people talk about education problems in Thailand and say the problem is with the system, we should be more like Finland. When they do that, they ignore the roles of people in that system. They ignore the roles that those people have in getting the system to function, in getting that system to excel. And in doing so, they effectively they effectively look over the obvious problem with education, and that is themselves. That is the people learning. They're not effective learners. They're not motivated. They don't give a shit in class. And they complain that they're not learning. They have this selfish, stupid, idiotic thing in their fucking minds that the reason they're not learning is because the way that the way learning has been designed is not optimized. They don't think that they're not learning because they're lazy, unmotivated sacks of shit. They think it's because the curriculum is wrong. They think it's because the school is wrong. Sometimes it is your fucking fault, okay? It really is. Yeah, no, seriously. You have to be a bit more motivated if you want to see good education results. Sometimes it is your fault, man. But yeah, that's not to say that, other aspects of education is not at fault. I think the thing is curriculum. Like the curriculum has shifted for learning, but a lot of teachers are aging like everyone else in every workforce in Thailand. Basically, they are an aging population. The average age of teachers is going up, and the unfortunate reality is, as people age, their ability to adapt reduces. They're not going to be able to change as well as a young person, both physically and mentally. So now you got these people that are like 50 years old, they've been teaching for 20 plus years, and you're trying to get them to change. It's going to be hard. You're trying to get them to teach the way that a young person, a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old came up, and you're trying to get these 50-year-olds to follow. It's not going to be effective. They're not going to be able to adapt to a new teaching style. They're not going to be able to adapt to a new curriculum. And it's not really a problem that could easily be solved, because as previously mentioned in the video, the population of the country is shifting to become older. You're going to get a lot more old people in the country, and of course that means less of the demographic is going to be young. You're going to have less young teachers, the people who are capable of following the new curriculum, following new teaching styles. So as you try to force these new methods onto old people, you end up with a mismatch. This sort of just random mixture of, old people trying to follow the new guidelines on paper, but fundamentally the way they do things are still the old way. So and there's this really awful synthesis, where it's weak in places where it shouldn't be weak, and it's harsh in places where it shouldn't be harsh. Another fundamental thing is teaching is something that happens between people. It happens between multiple people, in fact. And humans are hard. Humans are complicated things. None of them behave the way, none of them behave one like another. We're not like electrons. We can sort of predict what electrons are going to do, right? We can predict what objects are going to do. We can predict light's going to reflect off that some way. We're going to predict that if I throw a ball to the ground, it's going to bounce up. But you can't really predict people. Get 100 people in the room, you teach them one way, you're going to have people that come out on top, you're going to have people that don't understand shit. And of course, you can't fine-tune teaching to everyone. You can't have one teacher for every student, because that'd be silly. But at the same time, I think part of the problem here is you have these people that are no longer in the classroom. Maybe they've never even set foot in one, and they're trying to create a single teaching style. They're trying to create, a single guideline for every teacher. They're trying to get every teacher to teach every student the same way. But the problem is, different teachers, they have their own most effective way to communicate. Different students have different communication, ways to communicate that would most effectively resonate with them. And what ends up happening is when you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. Let's think of an analog, right? The United States Air Force had to build a seat for a fighter jet. So what they did was they measured every single pilot that they had, averaged out the measurements, like for arm length, leg length, torso length, all those things, averaged them out, to create an exactly average person, and use that average person to design a seat for their fighter jet. And what happened? The seat fucking sucked. It fitted nobody. Not a single pilot in the entire Air Force was happy with the new seat. Because, when they try to find the middle ground, it turns out that, everybody was, instead of everyone being comfortable, everyone was uncomfortable. And so instead, what they ended up doing was they had to make a seat which can be adjusted. And now everyone's happy. So reflect back onto, the education system. We are trying to create that average seat, when what we should be doing is we should be creating an adjustable seat. But of course, if you think back to the seat analog, right? A seat that could be adjusted, of course, is going to be a bit more complicated. It's going to be a bit heavier, a bit harder to manufacture than a single, simple seat. Same thing with education. How many different, how many different teaching styles can a single school accommodate? Right? So it does become difficult when you'd have to create, different environments for different people. But yeah, like I said, it's not as easy as saying, we should be more like Finland. It is a serious problem. It is a complicated problem. And there is no easy solution. And you will get people, the same people as the Finland supporters. They'll say education should be slower and should be more focused on providing people with life skills. But the problem with slowing down the rate of education is now it's no longer effective for people who can learn quickly. Right? And this can be applied with pretty much everything. If you try to make less exams, this is gonna suddenly the education system is now ineffective for people who can learn, who can think quickly in exams. Right. The thing about learning, right? People would often say that we learn things that are not useful in school. The Americans they will say they'll say shit like, "Oh, I didn't know how to file my taxes, but I sure did know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell." You know, that's what they say when they try to talk about how their education is horseshit. But the thing is, sometimes maybe when you don't learn that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, you end up with a country that's 1/3 obese. The real problem isn't learning that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. The problem is you don't learn that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Therefore, you know, your cells, when your cells they want to generate power, they're going to do it through the mitochondria, which the mitochondria generates energy by breaking down glucose. Blah, 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 right? The thing is, this stuff can be linked to real life things. You have to link, if you can link mitochondria to the process of breaking down food in your body, suddenly, you know, it's not a far-fetched idea. Suddenly you realize that, you know, mitochondria breaks down those glucose in your bloodstream. Low glucose in your bloodstream leads to glucose being released from your cells. That in turn leads to you losing weight. But that connection is not being made. And that's another problem with education. We're not being learned an application for this knowledge. And when you can't find a connection between what you're being taught and real life, you automatically dismiss it as absolute bullshit. Even when it's not. Alright, I think this should be almost the end of the video, so let's just wrap it up. Since we are talking about education, you'll probably know that my channel has a lot of, you know, educational content. Part of the reason I do it is because I do want to educate people. I want people to at least know things. I may not be the smartest guy on earth, but you know, if people can watch my videos and learn a thing or two, then I do believe that, you know, the world would go forward. You know, we're going forward as a society. If you have watched this far, I honestly cannot thank you enough. I really appreciate you for watching this far. If you liked the video, drop a like. If you disagree with what I said, you know, feel free to drop a thumbs down. But do tell me in the comments which part you don't like. If you disagree with what I've said, tell me so in the comments. And if you haven't done so, please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching.